What happens when a simple mechanic from the back shop proposes an idea that the generals laugh at? His formula was hidden under a code number, and then it held the sky over London. Let me tell you how it started. It wasn't with an explosion, or a grand mistake, or some brass band marching announcement. No, it started with me handing a white boy a wrench, and watching the sky fall right on my head. See, it was spring of '43. I was stationed out at the Burtonwood Air Depot, biggest damn maintenance base the Americans had in Britain during the war. The place smelled like oil, rain, and stale coffee, and the sound never stopped. Engines howling, men shouting, rivet guns popping like angry woodpeckers. War was in the air, sure, but around there, paperwork was king. And common sense. That poor bastard had been court-martialed years ago. My name's Richard Ellis, grease monkey, field tech, whatever title they felt like sticking on my badge that week. I didn't have a degree from MIT, or a father who played golf with generals. I had scars on my hands and a brain that could figure out how to make a busted fuel line fly another 1,000 miles. That should have counted for something. Should have. But the truth is, in that place, if you were wearing coveralls instead of a uniform, and your skin wasn't the right shade of command-approved beige, you were lucky if they let you keep your lunchbox. That morning, I saw a B-24 crew sweating around a fuel intake problem. They looked lost, the kind of lost that kills people fast and ugly. The young lieutenant in charge had more stripes than experience. He was flipping through a manual like it held the meaning of life. It didn't. So I walked over, politely, calm. "Sir, if you patch that line like the manual says, it'll rupture by takeoff. I've seen this before. You need to reinforce it with a graphite wrap. Run a pressure sleeve, then anchor it with a low-temp compound so it holds during climb." I got the stuff. He blinked at me. The whole crew stopped. For a second I thought I might have crossed a line. Then the kid smiled. Nervous, but grateful. "You can show me?" I showed him. We fixed it. It took 10 minutes. No drama, no fireworks. Until he showed up. Major Sandwell. White gloves, polished boots. Chest full of ribbons like a damn parade float. The man had a chin that looked carved from a tax form and eyes that said, "I'd rather be anywhere but here." "What's going on here?" he barked. The lieutenant straightened up. "Sir, the technician assisted with—" Sandwell raised a hand. He turned to me, slow, like I was something he scraped off his shoe. "And who authorized you to touch this aircraft?" I cleared my throat. "No one, sir. I saw a critical error, and you're a civilian." "Yes, sir, but you're not to interfere with military equipment, not to offer advice, not to touch anything. You're here to sort inventory and follow orders." Then he leaned closer. Quiet, so only I could hear. "And if I catch you playing hero again, Ellis, I'll have your badge stripped and your contract shredded." Just like that. The lieutenant said nothing. The crew scattered. Sandwell turned on his heel and marched off like he'd just won the Battle of Britain all by himself. And me. I just stood there. My hands still smelled like jet fuel and victory. But it didn't matter. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't even a person, not to them. Later that day I got reassigned. No more hangars, no more engines. They dumped me in Section C. Rubber storage, boxes of gaskets, hoses, and synthetic compounds stacked to the ceiling. Damp, cold, and quiet, like being buried alive in Goodyear's basement. My new supervisor, a guy named Fisk, greeted me with a cough and a nod. "Stay out of the way, Ellis. Don't talk too much. Don't touch the phones." And that was it. From frontline problem solver to rubber librarian in less than 24 hours. They thought they'd shut me up, bury me in silence. But see, the thing about silence, it gives a man time to think. While I was packing crates and counting washers, I started sketching again. During my breaks, on the back of inventory slips, on the flap of cardboard boxes. I'd been working on a new ceiling compound, something that could hold under pressure, heat, vibration, all the things that killed fuel lines in midair. I mixed formulations with rubber scrap and graphite dust, reinforced them with copper wire threads, and tested the samples in my flat on a damn hot plate. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I called it Recompound, for Richard Ellis. Nothing fancy, just solid. I brought a sample to Captain Vard, logistics officer. Told him it could replace the brittle seals on oxygen valves, fuel intakes, maybe even hydraulic lines. He looked at it like I'd handed him a dead rat. We don't test civilian materials. It's not civilian. It's my own formulation. We have protocols, Ellis. I ran tests. I have data. He cut me off. We have a war to win. We don't have time for pet projects from warehouse clerks. I stood there, holding my little invention, my hands shaking just enough to spill a drop of sweat on the clipboard. They didn't care. Nobody did. Later that night, I sat on the stoop of my boarding house, rain tapping out the beat of my frustration. My roommate, an old machinist from Newark named Luther, handed me a lukewarm beer. They laugh at ya. Yeah, good. That means they noticed. You got fire, Richie, but fire gets smoke in the eyes of folks who live in fog. Don't you quit. You hear me? You quit, they win. I didn't quit. I sent samples to 3 places: BOAC HQ, the Ministry of Supply, and an airframe company up in Manchester. All I got back were stiff letters thanking me for my interest and encouraging me to seek opportunities through proper channels. Proper channels, huh? Let me tell you about proper channels. They're a maze built to make sure men like me never find the exit. But still, I kept a sample in my locker, just in case, because I didn't need a medal, I didn't need applause, I just needed one shot. One damn shot to prove that the guy nobody wanted in the hangar might be the only one who could keep it from falling out of the sky. What happened next changed everything. You won't want to miss how this story turned upside down. You ever been so right it hurt? I mean, bone deep, blood warm, certain, and still get shut down like a backdoor poker game? That was me, walking back and forth across that godforsaken warehouse floor with my RE compound sample in one pocket and a growing list of rejections in the other. At this point, I had sent 6 letters. 6, each one more polite than the last. Each one stamped, sealed, and sent through what they like to call official channels. I'd written up field reports. I made charts with hand-drawn graphs. I even cleaned up my grammar, real clean, no street in it, so they wouldn't toss it out just 'cause the name on the return address didn't sound like someone's college roommate. And still, nothing. But I'll tell you the moment it really twisted the knife. It was a Thursday morning. Cold, damp. The kind of wet that seeps into your boots and makes your socks stick like bad news. I was unpacking a new shipment of hose fittings when I saw 2 men in dress coats walking through the compound. Not the usual brass. These were clean. Shiny shoes, clipboards. Civilian contractors, by the look. They walked right into the main hangar. 10 minutes later, a forklift rolled by with a crate marked High-Temp Elastomer Seals, RAF clearance pending. You want to guess what those seals looked like? Mine. Exactly. word for word, texture for texture. They didn't take my compound, they copied it. Or worse, some officer took one of the samples I left behind, slapped his own name on it, and passed it up the chain. I stood there, hands frozen to a crate of rubber rings, watching my work roll away under someone else's paperwork. I didn't shout. I didn't raise hell. I went straight to my bunk that night and started writing again. But not another letter. This time I wrote a full damn report, 32 pages, with every date, every test result, every signature I collected, every note I received back, including the ones thanking me for my enthusiasm. And I walked it straight into the office of Major Sandwell himself. "Sir," I said, "this is about the RE compound you reprimanded me for. The same formula I see now being tested on RAF units under new classification." He didn't even flinch. "Are you implying theft, Mr. Ellis?" "No, sir," I said. "I'm pointing it out." He tapped a pen on the desk. Once, twice. "Do you have proof that your material was used?" I handed him the original dated sample, handwritten label, sealed bag. He held it like it might stain his fingers. "You understand, Mr. Ellis, that accusing superior officers or contractors of misconduct without full investigation is unwise." I nodded. "I understand, sir." I walked out, and by the time I got back to Section C, my locker had been emptied. Not fired, not demoted, reassigned, night shift. No contact orders. Silence duty. That meant no talking unless spoken to, no access to outbound mail, and no ability to request a transfer without supervisor approval. They buried me so far underground I had to squint to see daylight. But I kept writing, kept sketching, because something in me, maybe stubbornness, maybe dignity, maybe just plain rage, refused to die quiet. But it wasn't just the system anymore. It was the whispers. Guys I used to eat lunch with started looking the other way. Some avoided me entirely. The ones who did talk gave me that look, the one that says, "Man, you should have kept your mouth shut." Even Luther, my old machinist buddy, started keeping his distance. "Too hot," he told me one night behind the tool shed. "They're watching you. I got a family. I can't lose this job." I didn't blame him, but it cut anyway. So I did the only thing left to do. I kept working. Every night, between inventory counts and rubber seal audits, I tested new variations of the compound, changed the blend, adjusted the pressure resistance. I built makeshift clamps and pressure testers out of broken parts. No lab, no funding, just grit and a flashlight with bad batteries. And I started keeping a journal, not because I thought anyone would read it, but because if I disappeared tomorrow, I wanted somebody, someday, to know I didn't go down easy. It was one of those bitter nights when I heard it. An explosion, distant but sharp. The lights flickered. Every man in the warehouse froze. Then came the sirens, not the test kind, not the drills. The real ones. We spilled out onto the loading bay, thick smoke in the distance. A fire crew sprinting toward Hangar 3. Rumors started flying fast. Sabotage, faulty seals, a pressure line burst. I just stood there, hands trembling. Not from fear, from knowing. Because 3 days ago I saw a technician from the day's shift loading parts with a new elastomer seal. The same ones they took credit for. The same ones that hadn't been properly tested, at least not by anyone who knew what they were doing. And now Hangar 3 was on fire. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my cot, staring at the wall, wondering how many more people had to bleed before someone opened their eyes. But here's the thing. Nobody came to ask me about the compound. Nobody called me in. Not even a whisper. They buried the report, classified the fire as equipment failure. No mention of sealants, no acknowledgement of the part I tried to play in preventing it. That's when it hit me. They didn't make a mistake. They made a choice. They chose to silence me because it was easier than admitting I was right. Because it's always easier to promote the guy who wears the right uniform than to listen to the one who actually knows how things work. That next morning, I walked past the rubble of Hangar 3. Still smoking, still guarded. I walked slow, but my mind, it was running like a man who's done waiting. This is it, the turning point. Everything you've waited for hits in the next chapter. Stay close. You're about to see how one man shook the system. Let me tell you what they don't print in the official records. When something goes wrong in the middle of a war, the first thing they protect is the paperwork. It was 2 days after the Hangar 3 fire. The smoke had cleared, but the air still stank like burnt rubber and varnish, like a mechanic's funeral. They fenced off the area, brought in officers with clipboards and dark coats. The kind of men who don't fix problems, just write reports that make it look like someone else did. No one came to speak to me. Not a whisper, not a knock, not even a sideways glance. They knew. Of course they knew. But acknowledging me meant opening a door they'd bolted shut months ago, and they weren't ready for what would come crawling through it. So I made myself ready. That night, I went back through every page of my logbook, every test I'd run, every modification I'd tried, every letter I'd sent, and the dates they ignored them. I wasn't looking for closure. I was building a weapon, not with steel, but with facts. I wasn't just going to shout into the wind anymore. I was going to force them to listen. But to do that, I had to go over their heads. Way over. There was a man I'd heard about, Dr. Martin R. Knowles, a civilian scientist on special assignment with the British War Office. He was known for being unconventional, the type who wore rumpled suits and argued with colonels in open meetings. A few mechanics said he once shut down a whole airfield because a gauge on a test rig looked suspicious. I figured if anyone was crazy enough to hear me out, it was him. So I wrote, not just a letter, a full report, sealed in brown paper, signed under my name, and delivered through a postal clerk I trusted. Didn't mention my status. Didn't beg. I just told the truth. Then I waited. For 4 days, I worked the night shift like nothing happened. Inventory, check. Hose seals, check. Floor swept, check. But every time I clocked out, I looked over my shoulder like something was coming. And then it did. Monday morning, 5:15 a.m., I got pulled off the line by a man I'd never seen before. Clean suit, clipped accent. Didn't tell me his name, just handed me a visitor's badge and said, "You've got 10 minutes. Don't waste it." They drove me to a gray office on the edge of the base. Inside, beige walls, 1 fan, and a man with white hair and a file folder with my name on it. Dr. Knowles. He didn't offer coffee, didn't shake hands. Just opened the folder and said, "You're the one with the compound." "Yes, sir." He raised an eyebrow. "I read your test notes. If even half of this is accurate, you've built something that could stop a pressure leak mid-flight." I nodded. "You realize how dangerous it is to work on equipment unsanctioned without clearance? Not as dangerous as watching planes go down because the regs won't bend." He smirked. "Fair enough." What followed wasn't some dramatic movie moment. It was quieter than that. Just a man asking questions, sharp ones, and me answering with everything I had. He tested me. made me draw cross-sections from memory, quizzed me on compound behavior under temperature shifts. At one point, he even tossed my sample onto the floor and stepped on it with his boot. Picked it up, turned it over in his fingers. "Still flexible," he muttered. "Interesting." After what felt like hours, he finally leaned back. "I'll have to test this independently. That'll take time." "How much time?" He didn't answer, just stood up and walked to the door. "Mr. Ellis, you've got guts, but guts don't win wars. Logistics do. Chain of command does. So if I go forward with this, you will have enemies. Not just the brass. Suppliers, contractors, people with factories already printing money off the old way." "I don't need friends," I said. "I need planes to stay in the air." He looked at me, quiet for a beat too long. Then he nodded once. "Go back to work. I'll be in touch." The car dropped me off without a word. That night, I expected the worst. Disciplinary review, maybe even expulsion from the compound, but nothing came. The next day, same. By the third night, the silence got so loud I could barely think straight. Then on Thursday, I got a message, handwritten, slid under my door. "Report to Building 6, midnight. Quietly." Building 6 wasn't on any map, at least not one they gave to warehouse clerks like me. It was a hangar that looked abandoned from the outside, broken windows, rusted siding. But inside it was humming. Test rigs, pressure tanks, engineers in civilian clothes. And there, in the corner, a small table with my compound on it under a microscope. Dr. Knowles was there. So was another man. Older, heavier, with a face like someone who hadn't slept in years. "This is Colonel Merrick," Knowles said. "He runs aircraft safety review. You're going to give him the same demonstration you gave me." So I did. I showed how the compound could seal a punctured line in under 30 seconds, how it stayed pliable under heat, how it could be molded mid-flight by a crew member with nothing but gloves and a field torch. I spoke like my life depended on it, because, in a way, it did. Merrick didn't say much, just watched, took notes, occasionally grunted. When I was done, he leaned in close. "You put this together by yourself? With what I had?" He shook his head slowly, not dismissive, just amazed. "All right," he said finally. "We'll test it under pressure next week. Full load, simulated altitude. You'll be present." I exhaled. Hadn't even realized I was holding my breath. But as I turned to leave, Knowles caught my arm. "Understand something, Mr. Ellis. This doesn't make you untouchable. If word gets out how this got here, the people upstairs will have your head before your compound hits the production floor. You're not protected. Not yet." "I didn't come here for protection," I said. "No," he replied, almost to himself. "You came here to fight gravity. Next chapter, the moment everything goes to hell, or glory. You've come this far. You won't want to miss what's about to unfold. You can fake a signature. You can fake a report. You can even fake a smile when the colonel walks by. But you can't fake pressure. That's the rule I lived by. Whether it was the kind that built up inside a fuel line, or the kind that settled in your chest when every eye in the room is waiting for you to fail. The full-scale test was scheduled for 0200 hours. Simulated altitude, maximum vibration, full temp conditions, the kind of test that makes even factory-grade equipment sweat. They were gonna push my compound until it cracked. And believe me, some of them were hoping it would. I arrived 20 minutes early, not because I was eager, because I couldn't sit still another minute. Inside Hangar 6, The setup looked like something out of a science fiction reel. Clear tubes, temperature coils, hydraulic valves feeding into pressure sensors, all wired to a control board manned by 2 engineers in starched coats. Standing off to the side were 3 men I didn't recognize. All suits, all quiet. One of them held a small notebook, but never wrote a word. They weren't here to learn. They were here to watch, to evaluate. Maybe to bury the whole thing if it so much as flinched wrong. Dr. Knowles greeted me with a nod. He looked colder than usual, focused, which meant things were serious. "This is the final stage, Alice," he said. "We only get one run tonight. Fail here, and your material never leaves this room. I know. You'll be observing, not touching. I get it. No interference, no commentary. You'll speak only if spoken to." I gave him a look. "I've made it this far without yelling. I can hold my tongue another hour." He didn't smile, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. That was enough. The compound had been installed on a live pressure valve, one designed to simulate a sudden rupture. The kind that usually spelled disaster for any crew unlucky enough to be in the air when it happened. They were going to trigger a failure mid-test and see if my material could hold. Time moved different in that room. Slower, heavier. The countdown started. Phase 1, ambient pressure at sea level, rising to 15,000 feet equivalent. No leaks. Phase 2, fuel line vibration simulation, still holding. Phase 3, artificial rupture. They triggered it. A hiss exploded from the unit, loud and violent, the kind of noise that makes even the most seasoned techs flinch. A split appeared along the junction, just like planned. The engineers moved fast. One grabbed the emergency tube of RE compound, already prepped and warmed. He applied it to the leak, pressed it in, molded it in 5 seconds flat, then stepped back. Everyone watched the monitor. The hiss dropped, stabilized. The numbers on the board settled. No pressure loss. None. You could hear a pin drop in that room. And then one of the suits, the silent one, finally scribbled something in his notebook. Dr. Knowles leaned forward, scanned the data again, then looked over at Colonel Merrick, who stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight. "It worked," Knowles said. Merrick didn't nod, didn't move, but I saw it in his eyes, the tiny shift. They hadn't expected this. He turned toward me. "Ellis," he said, voice level, "you willing to repeat this in front of a board?" "Any time, Colonel. Even if they ask questions you don't like?" I smiled. "Sir, I've been asked worse questions just trying to buy lunch." That got a few chuckles. Even the stone-faced notebook guy cracked a smirk. But the moment didn't last. 15 minutes later, Knowles pulled me aside. "You've done it," he said, quiet, "but the politics haven't." "What does that mean?" "It means you're about to be seen, and not everyone wants that." He handed me a folder, thick, stamped with a seal I didn't recognize. "These are internal memos, procurement plans. There are companies, high up, already invested in the current seal designs. If your material replaces theirs, they lose millions, and they won't go down without a fight. Isn't this war supposed to be about saving lives, not profits?" He looked tired when he answered. "In theory." I walked out of that hangar into a cold wind, thinking hard. I hadn't signed up for war with corporations. I wasn't trying to be a whistleblower or a hero. I just wanted planes to stop falling apart mid-flight. But now it wasn't just about the compound. It was about who owned the sky. The next week was a blur of quiet meetings, questions, and veiled warnings. One officer cornered me in the mess tent. "You really think they'll let you be the name attached to this?" He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. "Just don't be surprised," he said, "if you wake up and it all belongs to someone else." Another day, I found my bunk searched. Papers gone, one journal missing, nothing else touched. No explanation, no apology. I reported it. Got silence in return. By Thursday, I was done waiting. I walked into Building 6 and slammed my journal down on Noel's desk. "If this is how it ends," I said, "then we go public. I'll take this to the press. I'll find someone who still gives a damn about the truth." He didn't flinch. "Careful," he said. "You go too loud and they'll make sure no one hears you again." "I'm not afraid of them." "You should be, but that doesn't mean you stop." He handed me a new document, a notice of formal testing, approval for frontline trial installation, under conditions of discretion. "You'll oversee the first real deployment," he said, "under a different name. For now." "What name?" "Just a number, RE-47. That hit different. No credit, no mention, but maybe, just maybe, one step closer to saving someone's life. I took the file, because sometimes you don't get the victory you wanted. You get the one that keeps people breathing. The battle isn't over. Next chapter, field deployment, live danger, and a moment that'll decide everything. Stay tuned. This is where it all goes real. They called it a controlled deployment. That's the phrase they used. Like you could somehow control gravity, panic, or what happens when 30 tons of flying metal starts to bleed at altitude. But that's how they sold it. RE-47, my compound, was finally going, airborne, not in a test rig, not in a sealed lab, but in a live combat aircraft, flying real skies, carrying real lives. The mission was simple on paper. Retrofit 2 RAF bombers for a test run, each fitted with a small emergency repair kit containing RE-47, assigned to crew engineers trained in basic field SEAL application. They'd run a long-range simulation, high altitude, variable pressure, vibration stress, over the North Sea and back. What they didn't mention was that the crews hadn't been told the full story. What they didn't mention was that if the patch failed mid-flight, there wouldn't be time for backup. I arrived on base at 0400. Fog hung over the tarmac like an unfinished thought. Engines coughed to life somewhere in the dark. I met the crew near Hangar 9, young men, sharp-eyed, with that mix of pride and unspoken fear you only see on air crews just before a mission. Flight Engineer Banks gave me a nod. "You the guy with the magic rubber?" I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what they're calling it now?" He shrugged, grinning. "All I know is, Command told us we've got some kind of miracle glue on board. Said it'd hold even if we hit turbulence hard enough to make the wings shiver." I didn't laugh. "You ever patched a fuel line midair before?" His grin faded. "No, sir." "Well," I said, handing him a small canister and a heat strip, "you're about to find out how calm your hands really are." At 05:15, the Lancaster roared down the runway. I watched it lift, taillights blinking into a sky the color of lead. They didn't let me ride along. Said it was against policy, liability, too risky. Instead, I was stationed at the comm station with 2 tech officers and a clipboard the size of my disappointment. We tracked the bird's every move. Altitude, speed, engine pressure, cabin temp. I watched those little numbers dance across the screen like they held the truth. 2 hours into the flight, at 12,000 feet, the call came. "Command, this is Lancaster 6. We have a breach. Repeat, fuel line fracture, right engine, attempting patch now." My breath froze. I leaned in, waiting. Static. Then, applying compound now. Sealant is warm. Pressure is steady. Beginning application. 10 seconds of silence, then 20. Then, seal applied, holding, no visible leak. Pressure stabilizing, repeating. Pressure stabilizing. The room stayed dead quiet for another full minute. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the tech officer looked over at me and gave the smallest nod I'd ever seen carry so much weight. "Still flying," he said. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been saving since 1942. The plane landed 3 hours later. Smooth, no drama. The crew walked off tired, quiet, shaken, but whole. Banks walked past me, eyes wide. "It worked," he said, almost whispering. "It really... I know." He held up the canister. "You ever think this little thing would keep us alive?" "Every day." Back at headquarters, I expected celebration. Maybe a handshake. Maybe even someone looking me in the eye. But instead, I was handed a new badge. No rank, no promotion, just a new ID, Technical Liaison, Field Repairs Division, which is military speak for, "We'll keep you close, but don't get any ideas." I was also given a new directive: help train other mechanics in field application of RE-47. Quietly, without drawing attention to where it came from. The compound now had a number, not a name. My name? Still nowhere near the paperwork. 1 week later, I sat in a briefing room with 20 younger engineers, mostly kids, all listening politely. None of them knew who I was. I showed them how to work the seal, how much pressure it could take, how much heat before it'd give. One of them raised his hand. "Did you invent this?" I paused, looked down at the sealant in my hand. It was worn now. The test version I'd kept in my locker for months. My fingerprint was still pressed into the corner. "I worked on it," I said. "That was all I gave them." That night I walked past the hangars alone. The fog was back. Planes stood sleeping in rows, engines quiet but tense. Waiting. I knew what was coming. The war wasn't over. Planes would keep flying. Some would fall, some wouldn't. But now, some of them had a fighting chance. Next chapter. Recognition, resistance, and a spotlight no one asked for. The system doesn't like being proven wrong, and it's about to push back harder. You ever been celebrated in a room where no one looks at you? That was the mood the day the RAF issued a formal internal memo. A quiet one. 4 pages. Circulated between brass, engineering staff, and logistics. No public release. No press. Just tight, cold language with 2 key sentences that lit a fire I wasn't sure I wanted. Following successful field deployment, Compound RE-47 is approved for broader testing across strategic bomber units. Further attribution unnecessary at this time. Right there, that last line. Further attribution unnecessary. That's how they did it, turned a man's fight into a footnote. Like RE-47 had grown itself in a petri dish and walked into the war all on its own. But let me back up. 2 days before that memo dropped, I was pulled into a meeting with Colonel Merrick and Dr. Knowles. Small room, no windows, 1 desk and a jug of lukewarm water. The kind of place where decisions don't get made, just enforced. Merrick opened with the usual stiff jaw routine. "Ellis, congratulations. Your compound held under pressure. Good work." I didn't answer, just nodded. Then Knowles slid a folder across the table. "This is a contract revision. Quiet classification. The material will be reassigned under defense production." I flipped through it. 30 pages of reassignment forms. Acknowledgements. Patent waivers, all designed to look official, clean, necessary. What they were really saying was, "Thanks for saving our boys. Now hand it over and disappear." I closed the folder. "So that's it?" I asked. "No credit, no listing, not even a line on the internal brief." Merrick didn't blink. "You're a civilian contractor, not eligible for technical citation under current wartime restrictions. Funny how quick the system hides behind policy when it's time to share credit." Knowles leaned in. "Listen, we're not denying what you built. We're protecting it. If word gets out that a warehouse tech developed the most reliable field seal in the theater, you know what happens?" I raised an eyebrow. He answered anyway. "Every company with a current seal contract sues. Every officer who rejected you gets dragged. Every factory gets investigated, and the war effort stalls under paperwork." "So I'm the jam in the gear?" "You're the grease," Merrick cut in. "But no one needs to know where it came from. Just that the gears still turn." That's when I stood up. Not loud, not angry, just clear. "I didn't do this for a medal. I did it to stop people from dying." "Then let us do that," Knowles said, quietly. I looked him dead in the eye. "You already have." The next week was a strange one. Planes started coming in with RE-47 kits pre-installed. Mechanics I'd never met were trained on it. And still, no one said my name. But the whispers started. I'd walk past hangars and hear, "That's him, the rubber guy," or "Thought he got canned." One day, a young lieutenant stopped me at the tool line. "You, Ellis?" "Depends who's asking." He smiled. "Heard your stuff saved my cousin's crew last week." "Engine fire. Patch held long enough to land." I nodded. "Glad to hear it." "You ever gonna take credit?" "I already did." He looked confused, then walked off. And me? I just kept moving. But something was shifting. Slowly. Quietly. People who used to avoid me started nodding when I passed. Crew chiefs asked questions. One even invited me to check out a retrofit job on a Halifax. Asked if I'd sign off on the install. I didn't make a speech. Didn't demand anything. But I signed it. Then came the photo. A black and white shot in a base bulletin. Just a blurry image of a crew repairing a fuel line mid-flight simulation. Caption read, "New compound proves reliable in combat conditions." That was it. No names, no mention, but it circulated. And then it hit the Chronicle, not the front page, not even above the fold. Just a quiet column in the engineering section. Sources confirm new sealant tech developed within ranks of technical crews may be changing field repair safety. And under it, a quote from an anonymous engineer. "Sometimes the best solutions don't come from the top. They come from the people just trying to keep the wheels from falling off." Yeah, that was me. I didn't write it. But they used my words from a briefing. Guess someone had been listening after all. By now I'd accepted the spotlight wasn't coming. But then came the twist. I got a call, not from Merrick, not from Knowles, from someone higher. Commander Joseph A. Fletcher, head of logistics integration, he asked to meet. In London, when I walked into the building, I expected another cold room, but this was different. Clean office, glass walls, view of the Thames, a pot of real coffee on the table. Fletcher stood up, shook my hand, firm, no hesitation. "Ellis," he said, "I've read everything, seen the numbers, heard the chatter. I want you in on a new phase." I raised an eyebrow. "Not more silence." "No, this time we're building something bigger. We need systems thinkers, people who understand the gap between regulation and reality, people like you." He poured coffee. "Your compound's being rolled into mass production next month. Under its code, yes, but with a new line of recognition being drafted. There's movement, quiet, but real." I took the cup, let the warmth settle in. You offering me a seat at the table. I'm offering you a place where decisions get made. And that's when it hit me. Sometimes justice doesn't come in applause, it comes in access. What comes next changes everything. Final chapter, the choice between legacy and loyalty. You've seen the war, now you'll see the reckoning. There's a difference between being seen and being used. And by the time I walked out of Commander Fletcher's office with that fresh cup of coffee and a quiet invitation to join a special integration team, I knew exactly which side of that line I was standing on. I wasn't being honored. I was being absorbed. The compound, RE-47, was already halfway into mass deployment. Assembly lines were retrofitting bomber kits across 2 countries. Supply chains were quietly rerouting materials to support it. Every plane headed into theater carried a piece of something I built with my own hands in a storage unit that smelled like mildew and despair. And yet, my name, still locked in someone else's drawer. Fletcher offered a seat at the table, but the table wasn't what I imagined. It wasn't a place where things got built. It was where things got managed. That week, I attended 4 meetings. None of them had toolboxes. All of them had charts, spreadsheets, budgets, presentations on logistical redundancy and intellectual property containment. They weren't talking about safety. They were talking about control over who knew what, when, and for how long. On the 4th day, someone from procurement leaned over during a break and said, "Smart work, Ellis. Real quiet. Real efficient. That's the kind of win that keeps the machine moving." I smiled politely, said nothing, because what I wanted to say was funny. I wasn't building it to keep your machine moving. I was trying to stop the bleeding. But here's where it turns. One night, back in the barracks, I get handed a package. Plain envelope. No return label. Inside, a photograph. Black and white, grainy, blown up from microfilm. It's a fuel line, mid-air, patched with RE-47. Crew surrounding it. Faces rough, but proud. On the back, one sentence handwritten. "We made it. Thank you." No signature. I don't know who sent it. Could have been Banks. Could have been someone else entirely. But that photo? That was worth more than every official memo I never got. I kept it in my locker. Weeks passed. My name began floating in back rooms like it had a curfew. Some officers whispered it when no one was listening. Mechanics, especially the ones training on the compound, started calling it the Ellis Patch. Not officially, of course. Not on the record. But you'd hear it when the work got real. One guy even scrawled it on the side of a toolbox. Ellis fixes. Black marker, bold. Next day, it was painted over. Twice. But they kept rewriting it. That's the thing about truth. You can whitewash it all you want, but it'll keep bleeding through the paint. Eventually, I got called to speak at a training seminar. British-American logistics exchange. Boring stuff. PowerPoint before PowerPoint existed. I was told to focus on technique, not history. But when I stepped in front of those 40 engineers, half of them barely out of school, I didn't give them the script. I gave them the process. The tests in the dark. The trials with rubber and graphite on scrap. The failures. The silence. The storage rooms and cheap heat lamps. I didn't whine. I didn't cry. I told them the truth. When I finished, one of the younger officers raised a hand. "Did the Air Force give you a medal for it?" I laughed once. No, but I gave myself something better, a reason to keep building. After that, word spread faster. I started getting notes, from mechanics in Belgium, from pilots in Iceland, short ones. Used the patch, held. You saved my crew. They still don't say your name, but we do. Then came the last letter. This one had a government seal. It was from the War Office, a formal request to authorize release of RE-47 for post-war civilian application, fuel transport, medical use, maybe even aviation safety standards. But to do that, they needed a name on the inventor line, and they asked, finally, if I would allow them to write, developed by Richard Ellis. You'd think I would have said yes right away, but I didn't. I let it sit, because by then I'd realized something. It wasn't about them saying my name. It was about the fact that I still knew it. I didn't need a parade. I didn't need them to clap. I needed them to remember that the man they tried to silence was the same one keeping their planes in the air. So, yeah, I signed the paper. But I added one line at the bottom, a note written in pen. Developed during wartime, under pressure, without permission, but with purpose. I still walk past airfields sometimes. Even now, I watch the jets roar down the runway, rise into the sky like fists. Somewhere in those frames, some version of RE-47 still doing its job. Still holding, still quiet, just like the man who made it. This was his war, not in medals, not in titles, but in truth and in what he left behind.